Have you ever been stuck in a dead end job on a desolate ball of ice when suddenly you're attacked by hordes of vicious aliens? No, we're not talking about the winter on the Vermont Canadian border. We're talking about Absolute Zero, a new action game under development at Domark. We recently talked to producer Dave Georgeson about the dangers of mining ice in the Jovian system. Absolute Zero is an action game that takes place on Europa, the barren ice moon of Jupiter. It concentrates on the battles between human miners and a destructive alien presence.
The actual gameplay itself, if you want to boil it all the way down to a stereotype, is a sim shooter. It is basically what you're doing. You fly and drive and man turrets. You go inside, outside, and above things. But essentially what you're doing is shooting things. But there's a lot more to it because the scenarios are fairly involved. You spend a lot of time doing lots of different kinds of missions instead of just racking up kills and accumulating an overall score or something like that.
The story takes place some 300 years in the future. With the perfection of fusion drives, spacecraft can use water for fuel. For the past 150 years, a human mining colony has been at work on Europa, turning the moon into a refueling depot. Suddenly, a mining city is destroyed by aliens, but all is not what it seems.
But unbeknownst to the colony, a long time ago, there were aliens that had been fleeing an unknown menace that hid, burrowed to the center of Europa and went into suspended animation trying to get away from that. Well, the reason for that doesn't come out clearly until towards the end of the game. But basically what happened was there was a waiting game that happened, and when the miners started to delve into the rocky core of Europa, they got a little bit too close to the aliens. The aliens woke up, decided that the Terrans were an advance force from the people they were hiding from, and reacted incorrectly. And so they explode out from the center of Europa and incidentally destroy one of the Terran cities in the process. They didn't intend to, but they come up underneath it.
You'll be fighting your battles over the ice-covered surface of Europa. The landscape is currently flat-shaded, but the design team is tinkering with the idea of going to Garou shading. Europa may not be the prettiest place you've played in, but it will be accurate.
The Europa terrain that we fly over, not that it's critical to the gameplay or anything like that, but it really is Europa. We scanned in a NASA photograph and went for it that way. We exaggerated the terrain a little bit because Europa is kind of a cue ball. But the terrain is varied. You have a lot of canyon stuff to fly through.
Absolute Zero is not going to be a one-man-against-the-universe game. At last report, Bruce Willis is not stationed on the mining colony. Instead of assigning the player one character, the fictional person under your control changes from mission to mission.
There's also 7 different characters that you play throughout the story. And the reason why I consider that a good thing is that a lot of times, I've played a lot of games that I had a lot of fun at, where you're the solitary guy trying to save the universe. But on the other hand, I've read a lot of books, like say Hunt for Red October or something like that, where one of the reasons why the story is so gripping is because it feels real. You get a real world experience because from chapter to chapter you skip around from character to character and you go to where all the most important stuff in the whole world is happening, and that's what we do with the game too. So you skip around from the characters, from character to character, and then towards the end of the storylines, the characters begin to interact and dovetail the plot lines together, and you get a big climax at the end.
The action in Absolute Zero will be as varied as the characters you play the game through. Many of the missions will be in first-person flight scenarios, while others will have you taking a back seat to another pilot.
Some of the missions you have control of where you're going, and some of them you're the weapons officer. And the driver will be making decisions on where precisely to go. So we pop back and forth between the turret and allowing you to fly wherever you want to and have the fixed weapons on your ship. Every once in a while, we have a scenario where by putting them in the turret, we get to do some just really cool gee-whiz, stuff that couldn't possibly have been done if the player was just wandering.
Because the Europa colony is a simple mining operation, they are ill-equipped to fight a war against an alien race. You start the game with nothing but jury-rigged mining equipment for craft and weapons, but as you progress, more and more equipment gets adapted to war.
When you're in the game, as things get developed, you get to decide what goes onto your vehicles. So that if, say, you go through a scenario and you lose and you replay it, then you can decide if you want to change your weaponry and stuff like that. So you have some strategic element there.
One thing you can expect in Absolute Zero is a lot of really big dogfights. The team's goal is to create a large dynamic environment, not just a series of opponents you duel against one or two at a time.
We had 70 things on screen that you could see all at the same time, dogfighting it out, and it was radical. We kept watching it going, wow, we did the last scene in Return of the Jedi, and we have a different one where you're protecting an armada basically that's going to relieve a city, and I think there's probably 150 things in the air at the same time.
With Absolute Zero, Domark is attempting to create a gaming universe that can be visited many times and in several different forms, not just through action games. One idea already being kicked around is to do a sequel from the aliens' point of view. There's much more to the aliens than we've given away here. For those details, play Absolute Zero when it arrives at store shelves, which should be sometime this summer.